Hello and welcome to ATN World News. I'm Leah, and it's great to be with you, the audience all around the world. Well, today we're blessed to have with us again L.A. Marzulli. And you know, L.A. is a great author, lecturer, filmmaker, and he is also has his own TV show. And today he's come back on to talk about the coming deception that is coming our way. And he has done a recent DVD on Fatima 2 that kind of ties in where he explains about the coming deception. With all that, I'm going to say good afternoon, LA.
Well, thanks so much for having me on, Leah. Always good to be here.
It's always a pleasure to have you. And right now, go ahead and share with our audience a little bit about this coming deception.
Well, something happened in 1917, which in my opinion set a precedent and has continued into the present day, into modernity. And what this is the Fatima apparition. This is the one that really got on the map. And for those of you who don't know about this, let me just sort of give you the backstory. It's 1917, World War I is raging. The Bolshevik Revolution is in the throes of overthrowing the Tsar, literally, in the halls of power in Great Britain. The Balfour Declaration, which would eventually lead to the creation of Israel, is being bandied about. It's a very tenuous, tumultuous time on the globe. In Portugal, there are no airplanes. That's number one. If there are, there might be one in Lisbon, but as far as our research, for the most part, no one has ever seen any type of aerial phenomenon at all. They've never seen an airplane. Many of the people are peasants. They're uneducated. Especially out in the country, away from, let's say, Porto and Lisbon, the two major cities at the time, and enter these three children, Lucia, 10, Francisco, 9, and Jacinta, 7, very small, impressionable children. That's the first thing. They are completely illiterate. They can't read or write. They are uneducated. And they're out in the field tending their sheep, and this entity appears to them and tells them to come closer. The entity gives them something to eat and drink, but only Lucia, all three children eat, but only Lucia and Jacinta, the girls, drink it. Francisco never drinks. So everyone can see the entity. The three children can see the entity, but only Lucia and Jacinta can hear her. Francisco can never hear what she's saying. So now it narrows this whole phenomenon down to just two people. One is 10, the other is 7. And she tells the children, I'm from the sky. That's what she says. And here's the caveat. In no way are we bashing what people want to believe. We never really address that. In fact, in Fatima 1, Miracle of a Sun or Harbinger of Deception, we talk about people, millions of pilgrims come to Fatima every year. Millions of Muslims encircle the Kaaba stone. Millions of Hindus worship at Guru Puja, celebrate Guru Puja. Millions of Buddhists attend temples all throughout Asia. People have the right to believe what they want to believe. And we're not disparaging, make it really clear, we're not disparaging anyone's belief system at all. What we are doing is drilling down into the supernatural phenomena. I use the plural because lots of stuff happened during this 14-minute occurrence known as the Miracle of the Sun. And what that was is the children first saw this entity in May, and it appeared from May to October on the 13th of the month. So May 13th, June 13th, July 13th, so on. The last apparition, the last appearance of the entity was October 13th, 1917. And so what's interesting about this is that when the kids begin to let the beans, out of the bag, as it were, and tell their parents, immediately the parish priest, Father Fiera, believes it's demonic. Whatever it is, it's demonic. And there's a lot of controversy. It is Lucia's uncle who, after the third or fourth or fifth apparition, says, well, it's got to be Mary of the Bible. It has to be the Virgin. Who else could it be? That's what he says. And so that sticks. And you remember the people that are there are predominantly Catholic. So they're seeing everything and these events that happen through that lens of Catholicism, which is fine. Again, people can believe what they want to believe. But what we discovered in drilling down into what happened at Fatima in 1917 was a completely different narrative, a completely different story than the one that we're used to hearing. And I remember when I was a kid in the 50s, they had a black and white, I think, film of Our Lady of Fatima. And it was done dressed up in Catholic clothes, and it was the typical story that we've all heard. It was the Virgin Mary that appeared to the children, secrets were given, yada, yada, yada. That's not what happened. How do I know that? We accessed the 1917 handwritten documents. Those are the documents that we draw anything from. 28, 32, whatever. Decades later, we completely ignore them because Fatima begins to change. And as closer, we all know this, the closer to the event you can get, the more truth you're going to get. That's usually what happened. And so we go back to the handwritten documents from 1917. We also draw on the work of Fina Diarmada, who passed away in 2014, and Joaquim Fernandez, who I dedicated the first film to Diarmada and the second film to Fernandez. So I was able to meet and talk with Joaquim Fernandez in Portugal, and he comes on the film, and it just does a remarkable job. Fina Diarmada's daughter, Frederica Claro Diarmada, also came on the record and sort of has picked up the mantle that now that her mother has passed on. But the way it starts is Fina Diarmada got access to the original handwritten documents in the Fatima archives in Fatima, Portugal. And she couldn't photograph anything. She couldn't take any notes. She could only record what she was seeing in a tape recorder. So she would read as fast as she could and record everything in a tape recorder. This is how she was able to go and get those records. And what she discovered, that basically that there were two different Fatimas. There was the Fatima that we all knew, and then there's the handwritten testimonies from 1917, as I stated earlier. Let me just talk a little bit about Fatima and what happens. So from May to July, the crowds begin to swell. Word gets out to the populace that something is going on in Fatima, Portugal, and crowds begin to gather. Obviously, in May, June, in May it's just the three children, but in June, you've got the family members and others who are gathered to see what's going on with these kids. And something does happen. They even report that atmospheric conditions, flying hats, different colors, people began to see strange stuff on the 13th of June. July, the crowds swell. And by this time, it's really starting to get out of hand. And again, the mayor, the magistrate, the priests, Father Fiera, they're questioning the kids because only the kids can see the entity. Nobody else can. So September comes and they go, look, go back to the entity, go back to this lady and ask it, we need a sign. We want to see a sign. So the kids go back on September 13th and they ask the entity for a sign. And the entity says there will be a sign on October 13th, 1917. And enter the miracle of the sun, so-called miracle of the sun. And upwards of 70 to 80,000 people are assembled in the moors of Fatima, Portugal. It's been raining all morning. The people are soaked. There's a sea of umbrellas. The ground is very, very wet. And there's a handful of cars. The rich people have cars. Peasants are walking or coming in on horses or carts or whatever. Everything's very muddy, very rainy, but there are cars there. And suddenly around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the clouds part and the sun is shown in the sky. In front of the sun comes a cloud, and out of that cloud comes a disc-like object. Now, how do I know it's a disc-like object? Because we have on the record from the handwritten testimony in 1917 from lawyers and doctors, medical doctors, that they looked up and saw a dull silver disc. That's what people saw, a dull silver disc. Now, in 1917, there are no words in the vernacular or in the lexicon for UFO or flying saucer. Those terms won't come into the mid-20th century. So people are describing what they're looking at in terminology that they can use in their grid. They've never seen, first of all, they've never seen any type of aerial phenomenon. Second of all, most of these people have never had any type of supernatural encounter at all. Third, there's nothing in their grid system to process what they're looking at. This is why we hear, I looked up and saw a dull silver disc. The disc begins to spin. It floats down the earth like a leaf, spins again, goes back up. It does this 3 times before it does what we call the flyby. And I'll use a little prop here. It does a flyby. It passes over the heads of the crowd before going up into the cloud again and then vanishing. And there's no doubt that what people saw and what happened at Fatima was a supernatural event on some level. The problem is, what was it really? Was it Mary of the Bible, or was it something else? And the children describe the entity, and this was extremely troublesome. Again, this is from 1917 handwritten documents. The children describe the entity as wearing a short skirt. Mary of the Bible never wore a short skirt, number one. In 1917, women's dresses went all the way to the floor or to right at the ankle level. To think that women would be wearing, prostitutes didn't dress like this. So we've got a real disparity, with Mary, this entity that appears to the kids, and what Mary of the Bible is supposed to look like. And again, you can go to the statues that you see, and it's the typical Mary that we, have seen in different churches all over the world. The problem is the statue maker, when he was asked to make a statue of what the children had seen, had nothing to draw from. So what he did is he copied from another statue of Mary, and that's the whole thing has been perpetrated like this. That's what we uncovered. And I realize it's a sacred cow to a lot of people, which is why we're not attacking anyone's belief system. We're just saying we're challenging the official narrative, the official version. Most people don't understand that Lucia, first of all, Jacinta and Francisco die several years later. They never make it into their teenage years. So they die, they succumb to the Spanish flu. Lucia is 18 when she is taken by the Jesuits, put into a convent, given a vow of silence, which is essentially a gag order to an 18-year-old girl. And the convent is hundreds of miles away from her family. So she's in isolation. She's being handled by the Jesuits. She can't talk to anyone. I'm not making this up. That's all a matter of it's on the record. So in 1928, 11 years after the Fatima apparitions, this is when we get the so-called secrets, which have been perpetrated through the next, decades. And again, in 1928, the threat in Russia, or the threat all over Europe, was the communist regime in Russia. That was, people in Europe were terrified. Remember, Hitler pushed back against the communists. People were terrified of the Bolsheviks, of the communist revolution. Isn't it interesting that the entity talks about dedicating Russia? So I believe all that is a confabulation. It's never mentioned in the 1917 documents. Russia is never, ever mentioned in the 1917 documents. It comes later when Lucia is taken into a convent and given the vow of silence, and then she writes her memoirs. But it's not in the 1917 documents. So there's a disparity in what the official narrative is and what we uncovered. Then in the second film, and by the way, if the sun is as big as a watermelon and the earth is the size of a head of a match, in other words, if I use two objects that we know, the sun is the size of a watermelon, planet Earth is the size of a head of a match. The sun did not leave its place from the solar system, did not come to Earth. That's not what happened. But needless to say, people call it the miracle of the sun because of this flashing, pulsing, spinning, disc-like thing. That's what they called it. It's a misnomer. So all that we really get into in the first film, Fatima 1, and we show that whatever was passing over the crowd during what we call the flyby was a dull silver disc. Now remember, these are eyewitness testimonies who were there. This isn't someone 20 years later, well, I heard about Fatima and I think it was this. These are eyewitness testimonies, and that's what we draw from, the handwritten eyewitness testimonies. So that's evidence. If I were going to a court of law with evidence of Fatima, that's what I would present. That's what I would subpoena, because that's as close to the event as we can. The witnesses who were in the field that day gave their testimony to Father Fierro, and he wrote it down. So that's what we draw from for the umpteenth time. And in my opinion, it was not a sun miracle, although it was definitely, what happened there was miraculous in the sense that, and supernatural in the sense that people had never seen anything like that before. But what we learned, and we talk about in Fatima too, was there was ancient goddess worship all throughout Portugal at the time, And the problem is that this worship of the sacred feminine, ancient goddess worship, never went away. When the Christian era came in fact, before the Christian era came in, the Romans came in and they built temples to Diana. So once again, the sacred feminine goddess worship is happening. And these serpent cults that were in existence in antiquity, some of them are still in existence in northern Portugal today. And they worship the mother goddess, Mora, who often appeared as a serpent, but could change her appearance into a beautiful woman and seduce men. And after she was finished with them, she would kill them. So all that is extremely troubling, and we get into that in the second installment in Fatima 2. But the title of Fatima 2 is called Strange Phenomena, and we deal in what happened during this 14-minute flyby. And the people standing in the field who looked up as this silver disc passed over their heads, their clothes were dry. They had skin burns, burn marks on their hands, on their faces. What does that sound like to you? It's analogous to exactly what we see in modern UFO reports. This strange substance fell from the ground. It was called rose petals, but what, in our opinion, what it really was, these white fibers that fell are also analogous to modern day UFO events when people who have an encounter with a UFO talk about this strange fiber that falls to the ground. The hoods of automobiles flew open, windshields cracked, gasoline spontaneously combusted. All of this, the cars just stopped working. All of this, again, is analogous to what we see in modern day UFO encounters. I mean, I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. And again, it's something occurred that was way outside the realm of normal everyday life. Of that, there can be no doubt. There was also a fourth witness that Fina de Armada uncovered, again, from the handwritten testimonies. And she went, in other words, this witness had an encounter shortly before Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta's encounter. And she went on the record with Father Fierro. I think she was 12 at the time. And it's a handwritten testimony. And she's been completely ignored from people that have studied Fatima. But Fina de Armada learned of her name, Carolina Carriera, and she sought her out. She went to Fatima and tried to find her, and she found her decades later. It's just incredible. By this time, she was very old because in 1917, she was already 12. And I think it's around 1968, 1970, somewhere in that window of time where Fina de Armada finds the fourth witness, Carolina Carriera. And Carolina tells me the story. She was out tending sheep, just like Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta. And she was right by the same exact tree that the so-called apparition would later appear on or over. And at the base of the tree, there was this androgynous being, long blonde hair and a white smock, kind of laughing and singing. Let me get a drink here. And the entity, this little blonde-haired figure, communicated with Carolina telepathically, beckoning her to come. And Carolina was afraid. She didn't go. And so, check number one, someone's communicating with you telepathically. Check number two, Carolina realizes that the sheep are paralyzed, seem paralyzed. When she goes back to look at the entity's no longer at the base of a tree. The entity's floating above the treetop. That's check number three. So Carolina never had contact with this being, but this is exactly the same tree that Lucia, Francisco and Jacinta would later see their apparition. So again, this has been completely obfuscated from the official narrative that we all know about Fatima. No one ever talks about the mysterious fourth witness, but she was there, and she had a very similar encounter, which is, needless to say, bizarre. I think more than anything, what we discovered, and we published his book, it's by Jose Machado, and by the way, it's spelled Jose like Spanish-speaking people would pronounce it, Jose, but in Portuguese it's pronounced Jose. Jose Machado was the one that had access to the original glass plates where the photographs were made of from Fatima. He's a professor of semiotics. They analyze and look at film and photographs. That's what he does. And so he had access to the original glass plates taken on the moors of Fatima in 1917 by photographer Joshua Benolio. And what he discovered there, in our opinion, was a smoking gun. There were 14 photographs that Joshua Benolio took during this miracle of the sun, because he was there because people had been told that something wondrous was going to happen on October 13th, that the sign was going to come. That's why 70 or 80,000 people are gathered in the field, because people are expecting something. They don't know what, but they're expecting something. So he's out there, and these are the old-fashioned cameras. Put a glass plate in, click the shutter, wait, pull the glass plate out, put it in another box, take another glass plate. It's not like today with the iPhone. Click, 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 click. Whole different deal. And Jose Machado discovered in the glass plate an object. And stay right there. I want to show you what that looks like. This is a reproduction and a blow-up from the actual glass plate that Jose Machado took. And you can see it. Let me go back. There's the crowd here, all right? And right above it, you can see there's an object, plain as day in the sky. See it? And that's directly over the apparition site. There's a round circular object in the glass plate. And we held Jose's feet to the fire. We said, Jose, how do you know it's not like a chemical burn or a scratch on the glass plate? He says, no. Remember, he's a professor of semiotics. Whatever this object is, it's intrinsic in the glass plate. And I'll show it to you again. Here's the photograph. We published this book. That's an original photograph from 1917, taken from the original glass plate. And you'll notice over here, there seems to be smoke coming up from the ground. See it?
It seems pretty clear.
Yeah. And then it makes a right angle turn to the left. And then you can see very, very, very clearly that there's a round circular object directly over the apparition site. What this does, every now and then I get mail from people who think I'm bashing Mary of the Bible, and nowhere do we bash Mary of the Bible. I have great reverence for the God bearer. I do. But the problem is, if it wasn't what it's been dressed up as, and everything what we discovered points to a UFO event, what this does, and in Fatima 2, we show this. We show a compilation of so-called sun miracles and so-called apparitions in modernity, in the present day. And that's why I take umbrage with the way the story has been manipulated and doctored, because Fatima, and this is the problem, Fatima sets up a precedent which is then carried through decades until the present day. Oh, sun miracle, we're just going to accept this. And I say you can't. This is part of, in my opinion, the coming Great Deception.
That's a great analogy. I think that a clear point, in my opinion, is when they started to describe everything that they felt from this disc, the burning on the skin, the cartilages going up, explosions. Things like this happen today when people say they see something, quote, strange in the sky, an unidentified flying object. And of course, we here at ATN World News, we think that it's all demonic in nature, these UFOs, that it is a coming deception to explain away the gospel. Oh, it's the aliens, but we do believe they're demonic in nature. But the analogy that you've just come forth with, and you've proven by talking to all the experts, by getting the glass, the original glass. Imagine that, the fact that it even existed still. And the picture is so clear. And it was a deception from what you show. And their Bible clearly says there is a coming deception. So go ahead and speak a little bit on that, L.A.
Well, we had, and I look, for those of you who are watching this, my YouTube channel is L.A. Marzulli. Go on YouTube, L.A. Marzulli, and we've got like 85,000 subscribers and growing. We're hoping to hit 100,000 before the first of the year, and I think we'll make it. We're excited about what we do. I do 2 shows a week. One is Acceleration Radio, which is an hour on KGRA. The other one is Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural Report, which, and I've been, tomorrow, let me back up. There's the PPS report, which I'll post tomorrow sometime, is on the new film on UFOs, starring Gillian Anderson. And it's basically catered to teenagers, people who are teenagers and in their early 20s. And what this shows is a UFO event at an airport where people see it, and then immediately they're quarantined. The FBI's all over them. The first initial reports are it was a UFO. Then it's later turned into a drone. Yada yada yada. Well, as provenance would have it, I was at a conference over the weekend, and a former air traffic controller came on the record and talked about a flyby, a UFO event at the Miami airport. And he pulls no punches, and he tells you exactly what happened, it's very, very similar to this UFO movie coming out with Gillian Anderson and a couple of, actors or whatever. That's disclosure. But more alarming than that, Leah, is what happened in December on Tucker Carlson's show. And I analyzed this clip that he did with Commander Fravor, who's a former F-18 pilot. I analyzed it on Acceleration Radio, and I just said, folks, you got to wake up. This is the coming great deception. We just had disclosure, and most of you are completely asleep at the wheel. And just like I did then months ago, I'm doing again. We are offering Fatima 2 and In Their Own Words, UFOs Are Real, 2 films that I've made under the banner of the Watchmen Chronicles, a film by L.A. Marzulli. Fatima 2 and In Their Own Words, UFOs Are Real, half off for 48 hours starting tomorrow. And go to lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net, and look, I mean, you can pretend you know, but you don't know. There's so much information in both of those films. In Their Own Words is an hour and 37 minutes long. And the reason why I called it that is I had real people that come on the record that have had experiences, everything from UFOs, abductions, orbs, hybrids, Area 51, the Roswell event. It's all there. It's all there. And people who've seen the film, some people tell me they watch it 2 or 3 or 4 times because there's so much information. It's just too much information to get in one sitting. Same thing with Fatima 2. People are stunned by what we show in the film. And of course, I think the apex of the film, the defining moment of that film is Jose Machado's research when we show the round object in the photograph. I mean, you can't. It's not a bird, and it's not a plane. So that's. That just gives you an idea of what's in those films. But in December, Tucker Carlson had Commander David Fravor on his show. It was about a 5-minute, 6-minute segment, okay? So it was a triptych. You had Carlson here, Fravor in the middle, and then to the right, or I should say the left of Fravor, you had what was at one time classified UFO footage. And it was taken from Fravor's plane or another plane that was encountered this thing. that looked like a tic tac, a tic tac you put in your mouth. This white cylindrical object with no rotor wash, no means of propulsion, no visible means of propulsion, and this thing is moving well above supersonic. And Fravor comes on Tucker Carlson, and I'll just cut to the chase. And Carlson asks him, "Well, what do you think this was, Commander?" And Fravor goes, "Whatever this was, it was not of this world." That's what he states. It was not of this world. That's disclosure, because David Fravor, with all due respect to the man, doesn't have a book deal, isn't promoting a DVD like I am, doesn't do YouTube videos. He has no platform. He's essentially a non-entity, okay? I mean that with all due respect. He's probably a wonderful guy and maybe a father, I don't know. But he doesn't have a book or a movie, or he's not part of an agenda. He's just a pilot. And the question is, where does he get the classified film from? This is a managed agenda which the deep state, the powers that be, released in December. And you would think that the church would have awakened. But again, this is the same church that basically did nothing when Obama rammed down the gay marriage thing and made it the law of the land. Did the American people have a vote? No, this was just decided by the judiciary. It was a fiat decision, and it's like, what? I mean, how can they do that? So the church remained silent for the most part when the gay agenda was put forth by the Obama administration, and they lit up the White House red, white, and blue, and rainbow colors, which in my opinion is an absolute abomination all day long. It's just an abomination. And the church didn't push back. So why should I be surprised that the church didn't push back for this? Because they didn't. The church did not push back or wake up, unfortunately, when Tucker Carlson had David Fravor on. But it gets better. Since December, Carlson's had at least 3 different people talking about UFO disclosure. Leslie Kean comes to mind, who talked about it. Nick Pope was on talking about UFO disclosure. There was another gentleman from To the Stars Academy talking about UFO disclosure. So this has gone on and on. And by the way, the interview with David Fravor has been reproduced in other media since December. So it's gotten a lot of legs. The story's not dying. And that begs the question, how does Des Fravor wind up on Tucker Carlson? He's a nobody. Again, this is the deep state, the shadow government, releasing the information to see what the American people will do, which essentially is nothing, yawn. So disclosure happened in December. This is the coming great deception. The coming great deception is that when so-called ET shows up, they will say that we created all life on this planet, all life, including a DNA molecular structure, that they genetically manipulated early man, they started the world's religions, started the world's societies, and now at this critical juncture in human history, ET is back to usher mankind into a golden age. So that's where we are, and we're right on cue. It'd be very interesting to see what happens next. And again, I'm doing a politics, prophecy, and supernatural report airing tomorrow on this UFO film, which I think is interesting. The History Channel, once again, is talking about Project Blue Book, and I'll cover that next week. So it's all things UFOs. That is the game changer. And in the film, the UFO film with Gillian Anderson, the trailer asks, what about the existence of God? What if we're not alone in the universe? And what happens when we die? Basically, 3 major questions. And I have answers for all of those. But that's what the film is addressing. And I guarantee, I haven't seen the film yet, but I'm willing to bet $10 to $1 or 100 to 1, and I'm not a betting man, that the UFO film will show exactly that. They'll have answers for who God is, what happens when we die, and the fact that they show up, we're not alone in the universe. These entities, as you pointed out, Leah, are demonic. They are interdimensional, nefarious beings that are here for one purpose. They want to be worshipped. End of story. They want to be worshipped. And, when they show up, they'll have technology, and they'll also, I believe, have a chip which they'll tout as a DNA upgrade, and you insert it under your skin, and you live 300 to 500 years disease free. So it's sort of like a cheap version of immortality, and the line for that mark, that chip, will be around the block. So I think that's what's coming. And as I say it in their own words, all of this, the springboard for it is the Darwinian paradigm. I am writing a book. It'll probably be about 50,000 words. It's almost finished. We don't have a title for it yet, but it is on the UFO phenomena. And it talks about cattle mutilations. The book opens up with the Tucker Carlson interview. It talks about disclosure, the coming great deception, and that'll be out in the fall. And we're very excited about that. And because we've crossed the Rubicon, Leah, in December, and people don't understand that.
Yeah, we definitely have. We've crossed a lot of things. You talk about the tares being seen clearly now. As Scripture said, you'd be seeing it that way. The veil, you used to say, well, the veil is lifting. Well, my goodness, it's almost lifted completely all the way. It's just, there's proof upon proof upon proof upon proof. And so I think that LA, as always, has done an excellent job of presentation, getting his facts straight, and passing it on to whosoever will, who wants more information. And you can get more. You can go to a YouTube and check out his channel and subscribe to him. You can get his DVDs on these topics, and you can get his books by going to LA Marzulli. What is it, .org or
.net? LA Marzulli .net.
And definitely go check out his website. And we'll probably be having LA with us again. But for today, I really deeply appreciate him taking the time from his busy schedule. Thank you for being with us today, LA.
Thank you, Leah. Really appreciate it. And God bless you, and good luck with the show.
Thank you. And until next time, I'm Leah reminding you that God loves you.